In 2007, Kevin Garnett was one of the most dominant players in basketball, but he was dangerously close to being forgotten. He had the MVP, he had the numbers, but nothing to show for it. He'd spent 12 years in Minnesota with just a single deep playoff run to his name. And while other stars were chasing rings, KG was wasting his prime on a team that was stuck in the gutter. But then a single phone call changed everything. When KG was sent to Boston, it wasn't just a second chance, it was the turning point of his career. And that trade didn't just save a season, it saved the legacy of Kevin Garnett.
Anything possible!
When Garnett was drafted back in 1995, the Timberwolves weren't just bad, they were irrelevant. They'd been in the league for 6 years now and hadn't cracked 30 wins once. But when they took KG 5th overall straight out of high school, he immediately saved the franchise. As a rookie, he averaged 10 points, 6 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks per game, and although he didn't win Rookie of the Year, it didn't matter, because everyone in that locker room already knew who their franchise player was. By the time his second season came around, things were already starting to click. With Tom Gugliotta and a young Stephon Marbury joining the mix, Garnett was promoted to a full-time starter, and he took off. He jumped to 17 points and 8 rebounds a night, made his first All-Star team at just 20 years old, and led Minnesota to 40 wins, their first ever playoff appearance. In 1 year, the Timberwolves went from a bottom feeder to a real team, and it was all because of KG. And for the first time ever, Minnesota had a star, but more importantly, they had hope. From 1999 to 2004, Kevin Garnett wasn't just dominating, he was redefining what a big man could be. One game, he'd be guarding 7-footers in the paint, and the next, he'd be chasing point guards around the perimeter. He was the heart of the defense and the engine of the offense. No one in the league played with more fire, more rage, or more responsibility than Kevin Garnett. But Minnesota couldn't keep up. The front office missed on draft picks, they let players walk, and even got busted for shady contract negotiations that cost them future first-round picks. It was dysfunctional at every level, and through all of it, KG never stopped showing up. Because in 2003, for the first time in his career, he actually had some help. The Wolves brought in Sam Cassell, a fearless trash-talking point guard who knew how to win, and added Latrell Sprewell, a veteran scorer with an edge and something to prove. Finally, after nearly a decade of carrying this franchise, Garnett wasn't alone, and the result was the best season in Timberwolves history. They won 58 games that year, the most in the Western Conference. Garnett was a monster all year, leading the league in impact and playing every single game. In that season, he finally got what he deserved, the MVP trophy. But he wasn't done just yet. In Game 7 of the Western Conference semis against a tough Sacramento Kings team, Garnett put together the single greatest performance of his career. With the season on the line, he poured in over 30 points, pulled down 20 rebounds, and swatted everything in sight. And in the process, he carried Minnesota to their first ever trip to the conference finals. It felt like the breakthrough, like after all the years of heartbreak, the Wolves had finally built something real around their superstar. But that wasn't the beginning of a new era, it was the beginning of the end.
Extra, read all about it. The big ticket is in town. Kevin Garnett is a Boston Celtic.
Over the next 3 seasons, everything around Kevin Garnett slowly fell apart. Key teammates got hurt, others left the league entirely, and his head coach, the one person who truly understood him, was fired halfway through the season. In the front office, well, they panicked. They made desperate trades, wasted their draft picks, and instead of building a real team around their star, they handed him a roster full of mismatched role players and fading veterans. Minnesota missed the playoffs for the next 3 straight years, and with every loss, it became harder to ignore the truth. By 2007, Kevin Garnett was 31 years old, still one of the best players in the world, but completely stuck. He had given Minnesota everything, and they gave him nothing in return. He didn't ask to leave, but he didn't stop it either, and when Boston came calling, they picked up the phone.
I thought this is probably my best opportunity of winning the ring, so I took the big steps to make those adjustments, and here we are.
By the summer of 2007, the Boston Celtics were running out of time. Paul Pierce was 29 years old and still a superstar, but he'd spent years on a team going nowhere. The C's had just won 24 games the previous season, and they were in desperate need of a spark. So when Minnesota finally opened that door, Boston kicked it down. On July 31st, the deal went through. Kevin Garnett was officially headed to Boston. In return, Minnesota got 7 players and draft picks, the biggest two-team trade in NBA history. And just like that, the Celtics had a new identity. Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Kevin Garnett, 3 superstars in their prime. And it did not take long for the rest of the league to feel it. In his very first game as a Celtic, Kevin Garnett showed the Garden what they just traded for. The man dropped 22 points, 20 rebounds, and 5 assists in a blowout win over the Wizards. He was diving for loose balls, calling out screens, and by the final buzzer, the message was clear. The Boston Celtics were back. That season, they jumped from just 24 wins to 66, the greatest single-season turnaround in league history. Boston had the highest defensive rating in the league, giving up just 90.3 points per game. They led the NBA in opponent field goal percentage, and their point differential was 10.3, nearly 3 points better than the team in second place. And the heartbeat of it all was Kevin Garnett. He was the one anchoring the defense, keeping every player accountable, 19-9 a night, while winning the Defensive Player of the Year. But regular season success didn't matter down in Boston. The only question now was, could they finish the job? The Celtics may have entered the playoffs as the #1 seed, but it did not take long for the world to start to doubt them. On paper, they were unbeatable, but the postseason has a way of exposing your cracks. And from the very start, it was chaos. Boston's first-round opponent was the Atlanta Hawks, an 8th seed full of kids who weren't supposed to stand a chance. But instead of folding, they came right at the Celtics' chest. Every night in Atlanta felt like a street fight, and the Celtics, for all of their regular season dominance, couldn't win a single one on the road. It took 7 games and more than a few close calls just to survive, and things didn't get any easier. In the next round, LeBron James showed up with a sledgehammer. Night after night, he pushed the Celtics to the brink, and by the time Game 7 rolled around, it felt like something had to give. That match turned into an all-out duel. LeBron and Pierce were trading haymakers like 2 heavyweights who refused to fall down. And once again, Boston barely escaped. And for a team with championship expectations, going 7 games back-to-back wasn't just exhausting, it was humiliating. Critics called them soft and overrated. They said they didn't have the heart to win on the biggest stage. But inside that locker room, something started to shift. Because by the time the conference finals tipped off, Boston wasn't rattled anymore, they were battle-tested. They faced a Detroit Pistons squad that had been to 5 straight conference finals, a team that knew exactly how to win when the lights got bright. And finally, for the first time all postseason, the Celtics rose to the occasion. Ray Allen snapped out of his shooting slump, Paul Pierce took over late in games, and Garnett went back to being the most intimidating force in basketball. Boston won the series in 6, and just like that, they were going back to the NBA Finals for the first time in over 2 decades. But this would prove to be their hardest challenge yet, because waiting for them on the other side was the player who wanted it just as bad and had the rings to prove it. The 2008 Finals weren't just a championship series, they were a 21-year war in the making. Celtics versus Lakers, the rivalry that built the modern NBA that turned June basketball into a spectacle. Only this time, it wasn't Bird versus Magic, it was Garnett versus Kobe. On one side was a relentless force of intensity, defense, and will, and on the other, the league's most feared assassin. Kobe was fresh off of an MVP season, hungry for his 4th ring, and looking to do it without Shaq. This wasn't just a clash of teams, it was a battle of legacy. And from the second the series tipped off, Boston brought the fight. In Game 1, in front of a roaring Garden crowd, they set the tone early. Garnett was everywhere, swatting shots, diving for loose balls, and pounding his chest after every stop. He finished the night with 24 and 13, but the box score didn't tell the whole story. It was his energy that overwhelmed LA and his voice that echoed across every possession. Then in Game 2, it wasn't just the stars, it was the role players. Leon Powell, out of all people, dropped 21 off the bench and lived at the free throw line. The Celtics bullied the Lakers, outscoring them by 15 in the paint, and jumped out to a commanding 2-0 series lead. But the Lakers weren't going to go away that easy, because in Game 3 back in LA, Kobe finally found his rhythm. He dropped 36 points and Boston's offense went cold. The Celtics still hadn't proven they could win on the road, and the pressure started to creep back in. And then came Game 4, the turning point in this series. You see, the Celtics went down 24 points in the first half, and Staples Centers was rocking. It looked like the series was about to be tied at 2 apiece, and all of the momentum was shifting to LA. But Boston never flinched. They chipped away at that lead, one defensive stop, one hustle play at a time. And by the fourth quarter, that lead was gone, and the Celtics, against all odds, pulled off the biggest comeback in NBA Finals history. Now, the Lakers took Game 5 to stay alive. Kobe did everything he could to force the series back to Boston. But once the C's got home for Game 6, it was over before it even started. From the opening tip, the Celtics unleashed hell upon the Lakers. Boston forced 19 turnovers that game. They scored 131 points, the second most ever in a finals clinching game. By the time that final buzzer sounded, after 14 years of pain, it was all gone. And right in the center of all of it was Kevin Garnett. Tears in his eyes, arms raised to the sky, screaming those two now immortal words.
Player of the year. Now it's time to add to your resume. NBA champion. How does that sound?
Man, I'm so hyped right now. Anything's possible.
Anything's possible!